I'm Briance, founder and CEO of Cultmia, the #1 platform for discovering unique fashion. We scout the world for the hottest designers, bringing their most standout pieces straight to you on cultmia.com. Welcome to our podcast, Behind the Scenes. Join me as I have a conversation with the leading voices in the industry, giving you front row access to what's trending right now. Emily, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
This is our 3rd episode of Behind the Scenes, and we're super excited to get to know you a little bit better.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Emily is the founder and CEO of Emerge, an award-winning PR firm based out of London. She's also the best-selling author of Smarter, 10 Lessons for a More Productive and Less Stressed Life, which we all need. And she also serves as a strategic PR advisor for UN Women.
Yes.
Full powerhouse.
Yeah, busy.
So I'd love to jump into talking a little bit about Smarter and how your personal journey led you to writing this amazing book.
Yeah, so the book came out last year, and I'd known for a really long time I wanted to write a book. So I was down to study English literature at university, and then I didn't get the grades. So I had to rethink that. And I decided, it was twofold. It was partly because I didn't get the grades, and then I had to retake my A-levels, which was not ideal. But also because so many people who I knew who'd studied English literature said, oh, you'll hate reading because you have to forcibly read like 2 books a week. So you actually get sick of it. So I ended up doing criminology and criminal law instead. But I'd always had this idea. I thought I might want to be a journalist. I'd had a radio show at university. I sort of was stumbling towards the book. And I'd become really interested in the idea of busyness and self-created busyness, and this idea that we know so much more now than we did 10, 20 years ago about how to manage our time and our brains and our bodies. And I was fortunate enough to work with all these brilliant people, and they were just finding smarter ways to do it. So the podcast I had called the Busyness Podcast was kind of an early iteration of the book, figuring out and delving into this busyness topic. And then I decided to write it summer 2023, and then it came out last year. But from a personal perspective, I started my company when I was 22. I'm now 35, so a long time ago. And I had no framework for managing stress or burnout. I thought it was a badge of honor to sort of be tired and unwell and busy and all that kind of stuff. So it was a long kind of personal journey to understand how to interact with and overcome some of those things. A lot to do with self-esteem. I do think, and I talk about in the book, that I think productivity is very closely linked to self-esteem.
Interesting.
And this idea of socially now, we reward perceived success in the same way that we reward actual success. And I think the more and more your persona online goes further and further away from your persona in real life, that's kind of the space where like angst and fear and stress and burnout live. Which is kind of like the imposter syndrome, being found out thing. So having been through that and having worked with lots of founders who'd experienced, who'd invested in PR. Some of their businesses doing really well, some not so well, but it didn't really matter as long as they were getting coverage in the Financial Times. So I was seeing all this stuff up close, and I'd also seen the charts and in the business, entrepreneur and career charts globally for books, there wasn't a female author in the top 50.
Interesting.
And, I think there's a lot of literature that's amazing written by men, but burnout has previously been viewed through the male lens. And so it just kind of felt like there might be an opportunity to create something, that could add some value.
So much to unpack there. I mean, just for starters, I think the most successful people I've met have never been publicly promoting their success, which I think is so different to the world that we now live in. And it's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the female founder space, I find.
Yeah.
Especially in kind of the fashion segments. It's about kind of what can you screenshot and add to your feed in terms of like press clippings. And, that's getting so far away from what we all really think is kind of the definition of success. But something that I think we're all curious to learn about from Smarter is this idea of the 8 a.m. club.
Yeah.
Not the 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., but 8 a.m.
But you're a parent, so you must roll your eyes when I talk about the 8 a.m. club.
I mean, in a different structure. I'm an 8 a.m., 9 a.m. girl.
Okay, great.
I'm Latin. I'm Mexican. I don't like mornings. I like nights. I would say babies make that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But
we are, like, in our DNA, we have an affinity to a certain cycle and clock. So, you know, for some of us, we are just like night owls, or we have existed in cultures or experiences or places or families where we've been more connected to our natural rhythms. And then we're sort of put in these environments where we're retrofitting this architecture. And I mean, the 8 a.m. club is, you know, deliberately, when I first started talking about it, it was deliberately provocative. And I always used to caveat it with, oh, it's deliberately provocative, because I didn't, you know, I think there's a danger with topics like this. So they're all so extreme. So everyone's lazy or they're burnt out. And we don't really allow for something that isn't extreme. But actually, from the book, here in Australia, we're launching in the US this year, but we've been doing some bits there already. The 8 a.m. club has been the one thing that people have pulled out the most and been quite fanatical about and said, you know, I'm in this club. And the premise of it is that I believe that one of the really key pillars to living a life that's smarter is being intrinsically connected to your own circadian rhythm and your own cycles. And I spent the best part of a decade getting up at 5 a.m., being exhausted by 11, over caffeinating, eating too much sugar, you know, skipping workouts because I was tired, or it just didn't work for me. And I think there's this, it's funny, I wrote a piece for the Evening Standard about the 8 a.m. club, and the first comment in the comment section was like, this is slovenly. And I was like, thanks so much for your, you know, feedback. But it's like, it's connected to this idea of laziness. And I think one of the things that I'm really fascinated by is our sort of performative relationship with productivity. And to me, you know, if the 5 a.m. club works for you, fabulous. But there's a lot of people for whom it doesn't work, who've not really considered that it might be okay to get up at 8 or 7 because of the shame that's connected with it, which I think is a really interesting kind of social construct.
I think you need to figure out what works for you.
Yeah.
I'm sometimes never happier than when I'm in bed at 9, if it's that week. Other weeks, I want to stay up all night, you know? I think you have to be a bit flexible and listen to what you need and not force yourself to follow a schedule that works for everyone but you.
Have you ever felt like, as a business owner and a mom, have you ever felt like you would want to say you got up earlier? Or have you always been really connected to, you know, it's fine to get up at 8 or 9?
So we've been very lucky where our daughter was a really good sleeper. She was an enormous baby, like 99th percentile, like off the charts. But the good thing was she slept through the night very early. And I almost felt embarrassed and guilty to tell other parents that literally at 12 weeks, our daughter was sleeping through.
Yeah.
And I had to catch myself from not being like, well, I did sleep until 7 or 8.
Right.
Because she was sleeping.
Because there's like
and not
this shared...
like martyr myself of these like sleepless nights that didn't exist.
Right.
Touch wood, the next one is the same. But I'm perfectly comfortable sharing it. But I think there is this expectation of having to be knackered when you're a business owner or a parent, which I don't think has to be the case.
See, I think it's so interesting because a great friend of mine has twins, and she said that when she first joined this like twin mom group, she shared her story, which was basically like she slept with her husband and got pregnant with twins, like the end. And all the other women were like, we've been through years of IVF, and she was younger and she didn't really know, but she was like, I honestly felt like I had to lie and be like, we took ages to try. And obviously there's a sensitivity there, but I think, you know, from a business perspective, to me, there's been this sense of, if you're really stressed, if you're really tired, if you're like that kind of, or if you've got like I had a stomach ulcer and I remember being in hospital because it ruptured, because obviously I didn't do anything about it. And it was like a badge of honor to then tell people that I was like, oh, I was emailing from my hospital bed. Because and then socially I was rewarded because people were like, oh my God, like as if I'd split the atom.
She's literally killing herself for this job.
Right.
Yeah.
She's like, she must be so successful. And actually, you know, that's been a big shift for me. And to your point about the social media illusion and like particularly in fashion, because I've worked with lots of fashion brands and it's tough. It's a hard business to be in. And I do think often individuals will look for the immediate, you know, whether it's dopamine hit or likes or whatever, of being able to share that they're like delighted that, you know, some imaginary award has honored me with this thing. And it's the beginnings of sort of dissolving your connection to what real success is. And I talk about in the book being really connected to your own definitions, because for me, my definition of success is not that loads of people I don't know think I'm successful, but I'm actually in debt. Like that's not my version of success. But I do think that, you know, even the self-promotion stuff's really weird for me. Like we were joking about like no one wanting to interview me, but I've spent 15 years promoting other people. So it just feels a little bit unnatural. And it's been really interesting, particularly with LinkedIn and Instagram, you do feel this pressure to be like bringing out amazing news always. You know, no one cares that you're just like, oh, you know,
had an average week,
or like, here's a picture of the book. And I was like, oh my God, not interested. You have to be like Julia Roberts read it, or like it's on, you know, it's been selected by Oxford University as the book of the curriculum. Like these things just get higher and higher. So I can see how in that echo chamber of social media, that pressure exists. But I do think it's important to be connected to what you can actually like touch and taste and feel. And, you know, I think that that's one of those dark bits of social media where you can get kind of taken with that. And it's like, if you didn't have Instagram and your whole business would disappear, like, I don't want to be in that place.
No. And I think the concept of defining your own success really resonates with me. And as, you know, mutual business owners, a lot of times I see like the pressure to have a huge team, and like that means you're doing very well. Yeah. Raising a ton of money, and that what if your business doesn't need a lot of money to scale? That to me is a healthier business that I would want to invest in over someone who needs, you know, an exorbitant amount to get off the ground. So it's kind of like what other people in social media value become your success metrics.
Totally. Like you borrow someone's
make
definition.
No sense for you.
Right. And I think to your point, it's, you know, when you think about your own connection with your definition of success, I do think that when I talk about busyness being or productivity being connected to self-esteem, I do think that sometimes it's easier to be like, I'm going to focus on a fundraise for 6 months because then I can tell everyone I'm fundraising. I can talk about it. I can go to some talks and meet other people. You know, it's a thing I can do because actually sitting in the stillness of accepting that my brand isn't where I want it to be is a much harder thing to do. And so I do think that these things can be kind of willing distractions often, not always, but often. And, you know, I never raised any money. I've been involved in fundraising and I've made investments myself. But for my agency, I never really needed to, you know, I didn't have any stock. It was a service business. But if I'd been given money, I mean, I absolutely would have misspent it. You know, I sort of look back and think, thank God I wasn't encouraged to do that, because they would have given away part of my business and I probably would have hired a COO for 250 grand and not known what to hire for. And then that would have all gone wrong.
I tell other founders this all the time, you know, look at your business, look at what you need, look at what you bring to the table. And then you figure out the check that you might need. Yeah. And if you don't need it, even better. You know, we did no fundraising the first 2 years. Yeah. I wanted to make sure we had the right traction. We had the right, you know, platform set up to scale. Then I started to think about, okay, what would I do with someone else's money and what impact would it have?
Yeah. I also think that it's like huge pressure. People are like, I want to work for myself. I don't want a boss. And it's like, if you raise money, you just have like a demon boss being like, where's the money I gave you? Like, you told me you would hit these milestones. You know, you don't get rid of a reporting structure. I mean, hopefully you have lovely investors and everything goes well. But, you know, they are making an investment based on you saying, you know, it's a hypothesis. I will deliver this. And they go, okay.
You need to be really careful who you bring into your business.
Totally.
For sure, because that could definitely make or break your journey in so many different ways. But you touched a little bit on being busy.
Yes.
And I wanted to ask you when you realized you were addicted to being busy.
Great question. I've burnt out several times, and I was probably about the age of 28 when consciously for the last time I was like, I cannot do this again. And I was really committed to dissecting what I was doing and why I was getting myself into that situation. I was looking around, I was thinking, okay, well, there's there were people who are a lot more successful than me who seem to be less stressed. But, you've got to look at people who are perhaps closer to where you are. And I was looking at, people that I was working with, like Sarah Blakely from Spanx, and thinking, well, look, I mean, like everything, like wellness and business, it's easier if you've got stacks of money. So like, it's easier to be well if you're wealthy and can have a massage every day and go to a spa all the time and whatever.
Eat the best food, the best trainer.
Right, exactly. And like holidays and this and that, and, less financial stress in theory. And similarly with business, it's if you're very successful, it's easier because you have a PA to organize. So at that time, I didn't have any of that. So I was like, well, the thing I wanted to focus on was how could I, knowing all of these things, protect myself, but also create a business that allowed me to make those things easier. So how could I afford to have a PA, and how could I afford to do this stuff, to really pull in as part of a team to help me move forward. And I felt a lot of shame for a long time. Like the first year I had my PA, I just didn't ask her to do anything, because it's a very strange idea. And I definitely had to get used to that. But I would say when I had my stomach ulcer that ruptured, I thought about it afterwards, and I'd kind of convinced myself that in order to have these moments or these periods of time where I could just go and write a book, or I could launch a new part of the company, or I could, whatever version of that existed, that I then had to have a down. And I'd sort of resigned myself to thinking like, I don't want to be level, because I want the ups and I want these times where I can give everything. And I realized that hopefully life is long and there's lots of things I want to do. And I probably decided not to be in so much of a rush. And in my analysis, I realized, oh my God, I think it was probably connected to people pleasing, which I wouldn't have ever branded myself as, despite, years of therapists sort of like gently and more aggressively trying to tell me I was. But I realized that I'd spent a lot of time taking pride in my friends saying like, you're so reliable, and like, ask a busy person, and I'm like, great, I'll take it on. Or like, guys, I'll arrange the holiday because, and everyone's like, great. And I just become addicted to that kind of approval and the persona of being somebody who was reliable. And I liked the idea that my friends would come to me when they needed something. And I hadn't really understood the idea that, my cup was not necessarily being filled up. So I think probably about 28 was when I started to think, I actually really want to explore this. And I did it. The first 8 months of it, I didn't go on social media. I kind of wanted to be offline and just really like unpick what were probably learned behaviors that actually weren't really serving me anymore.
And I feel like overachiever.
Thank you.
You're an underachiever. Overachiever is an understatement in your case. Do you feel like that has been kind of your drive throughout your whole life, or that's something that kicked into gear a little bit later?
I think I've always been like that. I think I'm a bit of a try-hard. And I'm a middle child, and I think probably in my family first, I was more of the peacemaker. I was probably more like I was kind of the reliable one. My parents were always like, we never have to worry about you. And then in, my friendship group, I think, because I don't know yet whether it was sort of intentional. I mean, it probably was in some way, but I didn't drink or take drugs or party. I mean, I still don't. But I was the one who, like, the designated driver. And if my friend got in trouble or broke up with her boyfriend and needed me to pick her, like, I'd be the phone call. I wasn't the one you like went to Ibiza with to get over your ex, but I was the one that you would ring like night one. And I took a lot of pride in this idea. And similarly, like in a work context, I would get messages constantly from people being like, oh, hey, my friend's sister's brother went to school with you and his girlfriend started a, like tea company. Would you meet with her for coffee? And I'd be like, yes, let me give you free knowledge. Even I just never wanted to I wanted everyone to have a good experience. I wanted to be kind of a provider. And I think that was just went unchecked for a really long time. And it was well-intentioned, but it was... and also talk about it in the book, I had no boundaries. So I was just like, anyone, like if someone trod on my toe, I'd be like, I'm so sorry. It was just wild. And it got to, I work in a service industry, obviously. My job is to like constantly make sure people are happy and have the best idea and the best experience. So I think a lot of this stuff for me was just about consciousness and awareness. I just wasn't really aware of it and I wasn't like plugged into it. So it's been a kind of really fascinating personal journey as much as anything else.
It's this balance of the more I learn, quote unquote, the more successful I become, the more I want to give back. But then the more people ask.
Yeah.
And then how do you create that boundary?
Yeah.
And feel like you're still on the right path, if that makes sense.
Right. And also I had so many brilliant people who were really kind to me and very generous with their time. And I kind of wanted to also do that. And I didn't want, I just felt like if the people who didn't have to answer my emails that did, that really then kind of helped me, I wanted to be like that. But, you can't always do that,
So when you walked in, there were gasps in is it called the recording room, the sound room? I don't know. But everyone was admiring, I don't know if it's the jewelry, the bag, the jacket. You've clearly nailed power dressing.
Thank you.
What has your kind of style evolution been? I have to ask, given I run a fashion platform.
Course. My style evolution has been essentially an evolution from like total comfort to a more confident style. And that really also came from, I lost just over 40 kilos in weight.
Wow.
So I think, mixed up in all this stuff around my burnout and my relationship with myself and all this kind of stuff, I was ultimately just in quite destructive patterns, predominantly relating to sugar. And, we all know if you don't feel good about yourself and you have low self-esteem, you like don't choose abundant things.
Yeah.
So as I went on that journey, I think, and I've been writing about it recently, actually, I used to have this thing called the when I'm wardrobe, which was like when I'm
your aspirational
successful or when I'm, making this much money or when I'm engaged or when I'm whatever. And it was just like this constant carrot dangling that I never achieved or reached. And I would buy clothes, and I've always been quite a savvy shopper. So I never really buy anything full price. I feel like there's always a sale, there's always an outlet, there's always like a resale site.
I hate to disappoint you, but we just don't do site-wide markdowns at Cult Mia, but we're going to figure out how to get you on board one day.
But what I will say is I do buy stuff at full price.
I'm joking.
But like,
But you should be smart with your purchases.
Stuff. Yeah, and I'm very conscious now of like more trying to think about more of a style. So like I will now consciously see something and be like, oh, I love that. But actually like I don't really have anything to go with it. And it's probably seasonal or trendy. So I'm a little bit more connected to that. But yeah, I had all these, it's so funny. I had all these clothes that I bought. I worked for a company that did fashion rental, and we started with them probably nearly 5 years ago. So that initial wave, I mean, look, like eBay and all that stuff was already around, and I love charity shops and that kind of stuff. But obviously it's all become a lot more sophisticated. And so I was always quite interested in like finding a deal or finding a bargain or finding something in that sense. but I have never worn anything in the When I'm wardrobe, despite having achieved a lot of the things I set out, because obviously it was just like this weird aspirational suspension over there. And now that I'm like, oh, okay, I, have the thing I wanted, I realize that I do have more choice, and I'm not kind of like hemmed in by that. But I think that idea of when I am worthy is a really bad space to be in.
And I guess building on that a little bit, when you walked in, you made a really strong, amazing, positive impression. Are you someone who gets dressed up every day? And what do you think your kind of style presentation does for other people?
If my team at work are watching this, they're going to be like, well, let's see what she says. I honestly have like two speeds. Okay. So I definitely, I love comfort, but I like a kind of more elevated comfort. So like, I was talking to Mel on my team about this. I just bought the new Lululemon flares, which are essentially like yoga pants, but with a flare. And it's I have them. I feel like I could walk through an airport and like feel good about myself. Good, yeah. And like maybe that with an oversized leather jacket, and like it. So it's definitely comfort, but it's not like. And the silhouette those leggings make are amazing. They're amazing. Yeah. I literally went in and I was like, I was walking around yesterday and I was like, I could solve crime. I felt amazing. So I definitely think that for me, the root of that is like comfort, but also feel good. Like I think I spent many years dressing like a slob. It was like, you wear black, if you're a publicist or you're a PR, you're like invisible, if you're on the red carpet, the talent is in the dress and you're there like mopping up after them. And so there's definitely that speed which has evolved. And then I think the dressing up, I definitely like doing more, but I would say I prefer a more like tailored trouser jacket moment, or like a denim shirt and a shirt moment, as opposed to like a floral dress. So what do you think comes first, fashion or confidence? What do I think comes first? I think confidence comes first. I think being truly, I mean, again, depending on your definition of confidence, but being truly connected to your value and being able to show up in a way that is authentic and positive and abundant and isn't desiring constantly of external validation creates a very significant route to your value system, which then I believe is like the fan out for like setting your boundaries, choosing who you spend time with, all this kind of stuff. And I do think style and fashion fit in that, because the more you're, I honestly feel like since the age of 14, I knew what my style was going to be. It took me the best part of like 2 decades to be comfortable enough to actually step into that. So I think, yeah, once you unlock the confidence, you can wear whatever you want. For sure, I'm sure people who go to like the Oscars or the Met Gala like feel amazing in what they're wearing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're confident. Yeah, and who knows? We don't know, right? Can you imagine how scary that would be? Would you enjoy that? Are you like are you extroverted in your fashion? Would you want to like go to the Met Gala and wear something kind of crazy? I think it would be really fun to do once, but it's not something I would want to do on a regular basis. Yeah, see, it's my nightmare. I would like love to open the door from the Sprinter van for the celebrity and be like, please stand on this mark. Yeah, that's ingrained in me. But I think it's amazing. And I think I've definitely watched the fashion industry more broadly, like kind of wide-eyed at like the creativity and the way that people kind of take something out of their head and make something physical that then catches on in such a way, and can make people feel more confident. But I think it starts with confidence. I agree. And I hate to cut our conversation because I feel like we want to hear more from you, but we've come to the end. And we're just going to wrap up with a very quick fire of this or that questions. Oh, okay. Maximism or minimalism? Minimalism. Bubblegum pink or butter yellow? butter yellow, but I could never wear either.
Okay, I was gonna say, I feel like you're gonna say neither.
Yeah, neither. But like if I had to choose for someone else, yellow.
Yellow. Gold or silver jewelry?
Gold.
Feather or lace?
Feather.
Summer, fashion, or winter?
Winter.
Leather jacket or denim?
Leather.
Amazing. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much
This
for
was
having
so
me.
fun.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. Discover all the amazing brands we discussed at cultmia.com. We love to offer behind the scenes listeners an exclusive discount. BTS Pod, 10% off your next order.